By the early 20th century, communicable diseases posed a constant, existential threat to the British colonial administration in India. Outbreaks could paralyze trade, decimate the labor force, and threaten the stability of the entire imperial project. The government was already conducting medical interventions, but these were often scattered efforts. To be truly effective across the subcontinent, the administration needed a highly organized, systematic approach. The solution arrived in 1912 with the creation of the Indian Research Fund Association, or IFA. The state backed this new initiative with a massive initial grant of 10 lakh rupees. This heavy influx of capital served a highly specific purpose. It laid the groundwork for a centralized, state-controlled scientific bureaucracy. When we study medical history, we tend to focus on the laboratory breakthroughs and the doctors who made them. We usually look right past the administrative structures that paid for the test tubes. But to see how early 20th century state science actually functioned, we have to look past the fieldwork and directly examine the bureaucratic rules that governed it. The 1912 founding document of the IRFA functions as a deliberate architectural blueprint drafted by the colonial state. By extracting the rules from this text, we can visually construct the association's institutional flowchart from the ground up. Mapping this structure answers a central question of colonial administration. How exactly does a government sponsor independent scientific inquiry while retaining absolute control over what that science produces? We start our structural map at the very foundation, the association's core mandate. Rule 2 explicitly states that the association is established to investigate the causation, mode of spread, and prevention of communicable diseases. We can plot this text as the first piece of our institutional architecture, the baseline mission. To see who commands this mission, we have to look to Rule 4, which establishes a governing body endowed with total control over the organization's affairs. If we check the composition of this body, we find a stark imbalance. Political administrators heavily outnumber practicing scientists. The president is a high-ranking politician, the member of the Department of Education. Immediately below him sit the top medical bureaucrats, including the Director General of the Indian Medical Service. By staffing the highest level with political figures and medical administrative directors, the state guarantees that all research aligns with its broader strategic goals. The absolute apex of this scientific hierarchy is occupied exclusively by senior government officials, structurally isolating the decision-makers from the actual laboratory work. This governing body enforces its will through a single, powerful mechanism: complete command over that initial 10 lakh rupee grant. We see this written into Rule 11. It explicitly states that no scheme shall be financed unless it carries the direct sanction of the governing body. Rule 12 reinforces this veto. It places both the capital and the interest generated strictly under their entire control. In our system architecture, this creates an absolute bottleneck. Funding cannot flow downward without explicit political approval. Moving one tier down the hierarchy, we find the scientific experts sitting on the Scientific Advisory Board. Rule 9 outlines their capabilities. This board does not issue commands or approve funding. They are only authorized to examine proposals and report on their feasibility. On our map, the Scientific Advisory Board sits immediately below the financial veto, pushing ideas upward for approval but holding no purse strings of their own.
The actual physical practice of science is delegated to the lowest operational tier. According to Rule 10, the scientific objects of the association are carried out by working committees. We place these committees at the base level, reporting directly up to the advisory board. The core power dynamic of this blueprint is now visible. Scientific labor and proposals flow upwards from the bottom, while the lifeblood of institutional funding only flows downwards, released at the absolute discretion of the political apex. The original state grant was never intended to be the spending limit. The association was meticulously designed to absorb external private capital. Rule 7 establishes the criteria for membership. It explicitly states that anyone who donates 5,000 rupees or more automatically becomes a permanent member. Wealthy individuals could purchase a permanent seat and enduring influence within the state's public health apparatus. We map this as a side channel.
External private capital funnels directly into the upper echelons of the system, bypassing the scientific base entirely. This creates an immediate administrative risk. What prevents a wealthy donor from attaching strings to their money and hijacking the state's research agenda? The administration embedded a legal defense mechanism in Rule 15. The governing body will accept a donation, provided it is unaccompanied by any condition inconsistent or in conflict with the nature, object, and provisions of the scheme. In practice, this rule acts as a legal filter. It sterilizes incoming private money of external political conditions before it ever reaches the working committees. The IRFA engineered a highly effective public-private synergy. They could harvest vast amounts of external wealth to fund their research, while ensuring that all ideological and operational control remained permanently locked inside the governing body. Stepping back, we can now view the entire institutional flowchart generated directly from the 1912 rules. The most striking feature of this map is the vast structural distance between the political administrators at the very top and the scientists doing the actual work at the bottom. This rigid architecture looks nothing like a collaborative academic enterprise. It functions much more like a corporate supply chain or a military chain of command. In practice, this separation is a deliberate engineering choice. It isolates the control of financial resources entirely from the unpredictable, messy reality of scientific fieldwork. This perfectly reflects the broader logic of empire. The colonial state desperately needed the practical results of scientific research to maintain its grip on India, but it inherently distrusted handing administrative power over to the scientists themselves. Specific administrators in specific regional capitals signed these rules into existence, grounding the abstract bureaucracy in the physical reality of colonial history. We can see this finalized at the very bottom of the document, with the signature of the Undersecretary to the Government of the United Provinces. By mapping this blueprint, a clear reality emerges. The Indian Research Fund Association was explicitly built to separate the execution of scientific inquiry from the control of its resources. Early colonial public health was engineered as a rigidly managed, top-down apparatus. Its primary objective was the self-preservation of the state. For the colonial government, combating communicable disease required extending complete bureaucratic control over the very means of scientific discovery.